The Five Nights at Freddy's franchise is a set of unique games created by the mind of Scott Cawthon, with their origins stemming from his first game, Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., receiving backlash for being unnerving and visually scary, which led Scott to move away from his child-friendly games to something much more horrifying. The FNAF games, while being similar in concept to one another, are also drastically different at the same time, with each and every addition to the franchise causing the fanbase to grow larger and more invested.
To something spooky.
Despite its craze and popularity, is the collection of point-and-click horror games actually worth its success? Join me in this retrospective to answer the question, is the Five Nights at Freddy's collection actually bad? Releasing in August of 2014, Five Nights at Freddy's debuted as the beginning of Scott's assembly of horror games, envisioning a whole new way to evoke fear into gamers alike. Other than looking left to right, the player has functional steel doors, an outside light switch, and a monitor to keep track of cameras. However, this was not to prevent intruders from breaking into the pizzeria, but instead the metal-mouthed horrors locked in with you.
She is such a bad bitch.
Fans slowly began to give the game attention with its unique spin on the horror genre, and Let's Plays such as Markiplier helped to spread awareness about the game, slowly initiating one of the largest gaming communities on the internet. However, does this growth in recognition justify how good the game really is? The game's backstory is as follows. Our protagonist, supposedly short of cash, takes up a job as a night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. You're placed in the security office with little room to move, and accompanied with a telephone which guides you through your week. This simple introduction doesn't really give the player a good idea of what's to come during the game, other than the early depiction of the animatronics in the menu screen. As informed from the phone guy, you must survive until 6 AM, keeping watch of the rogue AI's every move. What makes the game's horror aspect shine is the sound effects, building the tension of the player as they attempt to close off the animatronic's route. The background ambience mixed with random blips of laughing machinery, the sound design acts as an element of engaging the player, keeping them locked into the gameplay to prevent being caught. A YouTuber by the name of Scruffy explores this idea further in his own video, which you can watch by clicking on the card in the top right if you're interested. Overall, the game submits itself to be a strong entry to the franchise. As we move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2, releasing only 3 months after the original, knew it had to step up from before due to its immense popularity and success of establishing itself as a serious, horror-intensive game. Despite the game acting as a sequel to the Night Guard's first encounter with Freddy and his friends, canonically the game is set to take place before the original. I don't want to dive too heavily into the lore of this franchise, since it's quite convoluted already, and it's not the topic of this video, but in the player's perspective, they may not understand how this game differs much more to FNAF 1, with its core aspect being to survive the week once more from familiar faces in a fresh redesign. However, FNAF 2's new quirks allows the player to adapt to their new office, such as the mask, which acts as an illusion to a few of the animatronics to disguise yourself as one of their own. This gameplay element definitely changed up a few things, with the robots now being able to get up in your face while you wait for their next move. As well as this, doors are no longer present, with all entrance points being fully exposed and accessible, including a side vent on either side of the office. This lack of privacy puts the player into a false sense of security, in contrast to the last game where you can shut yourself off from the outside threats. Finally, the last new addition to the game is the introduction to the puppet, being a character who bursts out from the screen if the music box is not wound up consistently during the night. This added gameplay mechanic increases the workload the player must endure, as whilst monitoring the cameras as normal to seek out potential animatronics, the puppet's timer gradually dwindles as the music box plays its creepy lullaby tune. In summary, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 does its job of adding a fresh feel to the standard controls we're used to, without being too drastically different. However, this would completely change with the franchise's next release of the game that parodies its own concept. Since the last location is shut down, the setting for Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is a horror attraction. This third addition to the franchise was not what fans were necessarily expecting. The atmosphere was the same to an extent, with being situated in another office, but it was more the gameplay which players were waiting for. After 2 successful attempts of making a convincing horror game filled with jump scares and tension, FNAF 3 could be considered to miss the mark with its game's mechanics. This time around, the player has to operate 2 separate control panels, one for the cameras like the sequel games, and another that reboots the cameras, ventilation, and audio devices. Yeah, that's right. audio devices. Instead of avoiding the original cast of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, the player now faces the undying William Afton, otherwise known as Springtrap, who is a real threat during the Five Nights at Freddy. Whilst the direction of the game didn't upset too many fans of the series, it was the actual genre of the game which failed to land. More specifically, Springtrap's jump scare. This jump scare is remarked as one of the least thrilling and scary interactions in Five Nights at Freddy's history. This disappointment made the game feel stale to an extent, as what the first two games did so well of building tension isn't present with FNAF 3. The animatronic hallucinations do temporarily shock the player, yet it doesn't justify the absence of tension or fear gradually building in the player's mind. Not to discredit the game's more laid-back approach, with the player having less threats to deal with, but as an independent video game, it falls a bit short from the rest of the games, including Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was believed to be the final game in the franchise, once again completely subverting fans' expectations as you're no longer in your welcoming office. As a matter of fact, you're no longer in a Freddy Fazbear establishment at all. Instead, you're trying to beat Freddy in a child's bedroom. Wait, what? The game's mechanics have you watching the left and right side of the room once more, but this time the animatronics are in the hallways of your own home. Personally, this game terrified me the most out of the original 4 games, not only due to the setting and appearance of the animatronics, but having to survive the night a completely new way. No longer did we have the luxury of using a camera feed to pinpoint where the animatronics were exactly. Instead, we were limited to use our ability to listen. Using the ruffles and footsteps echoing around the room, the player must run to either door and hold it closed to force the animatronics to go home. If you open the door at the wrong time, you die. If you use your flashlight incorrectly, you die. If you forget to close the closet doors, you die. And most importantly, if you don't remember to check behind you throughout the night, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 serves as one of the hardest games in the original 4, with all of these factors playing a part into ruining your evening. The tension built with the doors, closet, and the slow ticking clock all flood the player's mind without having a real sense of where the animatronics are. In your own bedroom you feel isolated, yet accompanied at the same time. I'm not too sure what the reception from fans was like in this game, but in my personal opinion, this game does the best in evoking fear into the player, causing them to really focus on all of these aspects in the room. However, what does this say for how well of a game it really is? In summary, the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise has proven to be a staple of the horror genre in gaming, and potentially popularizing the concept of mascot horror. So what does this mean for the collection of games? Is Five Nights at Freddy's a bad franchise? Of course not. Despite its discrepancies of a confusing plotline, and with a few gameplay issues which can seem repetitive or outright not scary, FNAF has amassed a huge fanbase of hundreds of thousands of fans, leading to the production of a real Five Nights at Freddy's movie later this year. The series has had many more releases past these 4 games, so if you already decided to comment that I left out the other games, I bet you look stupid now, huh? But either way, if you would like to see me do a part 2 of the rest of the games in the franchise, leave a comment down below for a part 2. Anyway, bye!